In Venezuela, Deputy Jorge Rodríguez is ratified as President of the National Assembly for the 2023-2024 session. In Haiti, health workers remained on strike to demand better working conditions and the availability of minimum services. And Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a unilateral 36-hour ceasefire to mark the orthodox Christmas, asking Ukraine to respect it. Hello, welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is from the south. Deputy Jorge Rodríguez was ratified as President of the National Assembly of Venezuela for the 2023-2024 session. During the installation session of the legislative period, the deputies approved by majority the presidency of Jorge Rodríguez, who for 2 years has guaranteed respect, dialogue, and peace in the country. The parliamentarians of the bloc of the homeland highlighted that the current Congress has promoted political freedoms and democratic guarantees without any kind of restrictions. During the activity, deputies Pedro Infante and America Perez were elected to complete the composition of the board of directors. The agenda of the day ratified the strategy implemented by the executive to promote dialogue and the protection of the people in the face of economic blockade threats and coercive measures applied by Washington.
I'm referring to Mr. Donald Trump, who is the intellectual author of all this brutal agenda against the people of Venezuela. They believe that by means of aggression they would be able to subdue the people of Venezuela, and they use this precinct and all the spaces provided by the legislative branch to do exactly the opposite of what was imposed on them by the sacred oath. They used it for evil, they used it for harm, they used it to prevent the arrival of medicines to Venezuela so that we could not buy the food that the Venezuelan people need.
Argentina's national executive is working to get Congress's approval on its request for impeachment against the Supreme Court of Justice promoted by President Alberto Fernández. On Thursday, Argentina's presidency spokeswoman Gabriela Cerruti pointed out that the government will try to gather rules so that the Chamber of Deputies endorses the initiative. On January 1st, Alberto Fernández personally announced a request directed against the president of the Supreme Court, Horacio Rosati, denouncing the court's unfaithful interference in other powers of the state, together with its links to recent corruption scandals. The petition, which has the support of 11 governors of the nation, will begin to be processed in the Congress in 15 days. The document needs the support of 2/3 of the legislators in the lower house to follow its course, and those involved in the process do not rule out that the opposition might succeed in blocking the initiative. In his first days in office, President Lula reaffirmed his interest in reviving Latin America and Caribbean Union. The recently elected president of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, confirmed his country's return to the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, and he will travel to Argentina to ratify this decision at the summit of the heads of state of the regional organization to be held in Buenos Aires on January 24th. The announcement of his participation was confirmed by the president. Bolivia, Luis Arce. Brazil's far-right former President Jair Bolsonaro withdrew the country from CELAC in 2020. He did the same with the Union of South America, and claiming that it was an operation of the late Venezuelan President Hugo Chávez Frías to exercise leftist power in the region. Mexico prepares for the holding of the Northern Summit with the presidents of the U.S. and Canada. Mexico Secretary of Foreign Affairs Marcelo Ebrard gave details of the main topics to be discussed. During President López Obrador's morning press conference, Ebrard revealed that the Mexican president will emphasize on a new stage for the northern region, but with the idea of extending it to all of the Americas. In this sense, one of the priorities will be the fight against poverty and the attention to young people and women. The Mexican official also pointed out that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will give permanent information on the bilateral meetings as well as the summit itself.
First, diversity, equity, inclusion. Second, climate change and environment, the ongoing action that you will also remember. These two that I have just referred to, diversity, inclusion and equity and climate change, were also topics at the previous summit we had in Washington. Competitiveness of the region, what we have to do, be more competitive, immigration and development, health, after the experience we had in the pandemic, and of course, the security.
And the Mexican government informed on Thursday the detention of the son of drug trafficker Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, Loera Olvidio Guzmán López, one of the leaders of the faction of the Sinaloa cartel. Guzmán López was captured in Sinaloa on Thursday after a 6-month surveillance operation. Gunfire and carjackings have been reported in the city of Culiacán in an apparent backlash after armed forces carried out the raid early on Thursday. A Mexican airline said a plane scheduled to fly from the city was hit by bullets before taking off. Defense Minister Luis Crescencio Sandoval said Guzmán López is accused of leading a faction of his father's notorious Sinaloa cartel, one of the largest drug trafficking organizations in the world. In Haiti, health workers remain on strike to demand better working conditions and the availability of minimum services. The health personnel of the country's state university's hospital are demanding that oxygen and electricity be made available in health care centers, in addition to a salary increase to face the galloping inflation, which exceeded 47% in December. In this sense, residents announced that currently medical personnel will earn less than $2.8 without access to social protection. Likewise, the participants called for a real commitment so that the hospitals are able to adequately attend to their citizens. President Joe Biden on Sunday will make his first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border since taking office, according to administration officials. His visit aims to get a closer look at the border control operations and meet with local officials. On Wednesday, the president expressed his intention to visit the border before his trip to Mexico City for the Northern Summit with his Canadian and Mexican counterparts. The president gave a speech in which he unveiled a new humanitarian parole program for migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. The United States will accept up to 30,000 immigrants a month from those countries in a border strategy that will be combined with an increased use of Title 42 removals. The initiative is intended to combat the surge in immigration that is straining the U.S. immigration system. Let's take a short break now. Join us again after this. And also don't forget to follow us on our TikTok account at teleSUR English for more. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a unilateral 36-hour ceasefire to mark the Orthodox Christmas, asking Ukraine to respect it. The announcement comes after Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Kirill, called for a Christmas ceasefire in the conflict zones and a dialogue between the presidents of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Russian President Vladimir Putin, addressing regional issues. Both heads of state discussed the trilateral grain deal, peace negotiations, and the possibility of a unilateral ceasefire, together with a vision for a fair solution to the conflict. President Putin expressed his government's willingness to dialogue with Ukraine if Kyiv accepts as Russian the territories of Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, recently annexed to Russia after a referendum on the matter. Other issues addressed at the meeting were the gas hub project and the situation in Syria. And moving on, French bakeries demanded government assistance amid warnings that the country's iconic faces an existential threat due to the double hit of their higher wheat and energy prices. In the context, French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said that all energy suppliers had committed to dissolve contracts when prices have risen prohibitively high and unsustainable for most bakeries. Le Maire added that contracts will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis depending on the owner's situation, and financial assistance may be offered. Meanwhile, the government also announced plans to support the industry by allowing bakers to spread tax payments and suggested that further cash support for energy bills may follow.
About two-thirds of the companies, I'm not talking about just bakeries, I'm talking about all the small companies. Two-thirds of them have problems and have to renegotiate their energy contracts over the last weeks and months, and there are several specific cases. Some of them renegotiated contracts with rising price, and let me tell you that price will go up for everybody because there is no other option. There is no miracle, but the price of their contracts increased in a reasonable proportion, which they can absorb, and there are some. We hear about it every day, we read it in the papers, and now this is the case of some of you with price 5-10 times higher, and there is no normal. This is abusive and aberrant.
The Spanish police dismantled in Malaga a criminal group dedicated to labor exploitation and fraudulent regulation of undocumented migrants, mainly Moroccans, who were charged up to 3,000 euros. As shown in a video released by the National Police, the agents entered and searched 4 homes in the province of Malaga, in which they seized more than 50,000 euros in cash and abundant documentation. In the operation, 43 people of various nationalities were arrested, including the leaders of the group. It is believed that at least 7 agricultural companies were involved in the labor exploitation scheme. Spain is a key gateway to Europe for illegal immigration from Africa. In 2002, more than 30,000 people entered the country without permission. However, this is 25% less than in the previous year. And gas stations in Spain are noticeably quieter in the first week of 2023 after the government halted fuel subsidies. Spain began its fuel subsidy last April as a way to support its people amid rising energy prices brought about by the crisis in Ukraine and the slowing global economy. Previously, the government was offering drivers a 0.2 cents per liter subsidy, which could have motorists of up to 14 euros when filling up their fuel tanks in the brim. But by the end of 2022, gas prices in the country returned to levels similar to those before the Ukrainian conflict, although far lower than the price peak reached last summer. However, the considerable fuel expenses are still a burden to many people with tightening finances.
Gas stations under various brands have launched their own promotions. For example, we at Repsol offer a 0.1 cents per liter discount for registered members who pay through our app. Business in the last few days of 2022 was great. People rush to refill their cars taking advantage of the 0.2 cents per liter subsidy. Obviously, the number of cars coming for gas now is significantly lower.
Gas prices are getting higher now, so are the prices of electricity and food. The cost of living is higher, but our salaries haven't caught up. I have to spend about 30% to 40% more on energy cost per month. That's about 70 euros.
In the Philippines, the National Police Chief Rodolfo Azurin said on Thursday he has offered his resignation to encourage nearly 1,000 other top police officials to do the same after some enforcers were arrested due to illegal drugs. The statement comes after Interior Secretary Benjamin Avalos Jr. urged all police generals and colonels to submit their courtesy resignations in a drastic move to improve the police force's notorious image in the country. The action follows the suspension of frontline drug enforcement agents for drug trafficking. Azurin told a TV news conference that those who submit their resignations would stay in their jobs unless President Marcos Jr. decides to accept them. A 5-member committee would be formed to assess possible links of police generals and colonels to illegal drugs trade. We're taking our last break now. Join us again after this. And also don't forget to follow me on my Twitter at teleSUR. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. West African states assured there would be no immediate sanctions against Mali despite an ultimatum about the 46 Ivorian soldiers held captive there since July. On December 30th, the soldiers had been sentenced to 20 years in prison before the expiration of the ultimatum sent by the West African heads of state to the Malian junta to release them. At the end of the two-day trial in Bamako, they were found guilty of attacking and conspiring against the government, possessing, carrying, and transporting weapons and war ammunition with the aim of disturbing public order through intimidation or terror, among other charges. The government of Togo has been mediating for the release of the prisoners through a diplomatic approach. On Thursday, hundreds of demonstrators took over the streets of the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, to demand military rules leave power. The demonstrators also rejected a deal for the gradual transfer of power to civilian leaders. On Thursday's protests were led by the Resistance Committees, which is a grassroots group that has firmly rejected any negotiations with Sudan's military leaders. General Abdel Fattah Burhan and General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo. Last month, the two military leaders signed a framework agreement with the main national pro-democracy group. The agreement between military and civilian leaders avoided sensitive political issues concerning transitional justice and reforming the police, a policy that promises to integrate various armed factions into one fighting force. The government of Senegal banned a demonstration that meant to denounce the lack of resources in the fight against COVID-19. The opposition had scheduled this mobilization for next Friday in the city of Dakar after the court accounts audit reports got published. According to demonstrators, this document provides evidence of irregularities in the management of the anti-COVID funds. In this sense, local authorities denied the permission, alleging roadworks in the place besides the preparation for the celebration of the Independence Day next April 4th. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan assured on Thursday that he is studying the possibility of holding early presidential and parliamentary elections originally scheduled for June 18th. The Turkish authorities evaluated holding the polls earlier than planned due to vacation season and to the start of university exams in June, which could reduce turnout in the elections. Local political scientists rate April 30th, May 7th, or May 14th as possible dates for the polls. The ruling Justice and Department Party and its allies, the Nationalist Movement Party, had earlier announced that the incumbent Turkish president would be their sole candidate. In turn, the opposition has not yet named its candidates for the presidential elections. On Wednesday, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad received the foreign minister of the United Arab Emirates in Damascus as part of the thawing of relations between the two nations. Sources confirm they discussed ways to improve bilateral relations between their nations, as well as a number of regional and international issues of common interest. The foreign minister, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, stressed his government's support for a political solution to the more than a decade-old Syrian conflict in the second visit to Damascus since November 2021. His nation was the first Gulf country to reopen its embassy in Syria at the end of 2018 and also sent several batches of humanitarian aid to help the Syrian people overcome the aftermath of the blockade of the COVID-19 pandemic. On Thursday, the World Health Organization said that the latest Omicron subvariant is the most transmissible strain of COVID-19 yet. However, it does not seem to make people sicker. Data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that the new subvariant XBB.1.5 has spread quickly across the northern U.S. and accounts for about 41% of confirmed COVID cases across the nation. Maria Van Kerkhove, the WHO's COVID-19 technical lead, warned that the number of people infected with this subvariant has doubled in the U.S. about every 2 weeks and has been detected in 29 countries. Experts said this is just skilled at dodging antibodies from vaccines and infection as the previous XBB and XBB.1 variants. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also be sure to follow us on our socials. We're on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.